Good afternoon and welcome to the M.F.A Museum of Art. My name is Ben, I'm an art studio major and will be graduating at the end of this year, and I'm currently serving here as a visitor services assistant. Before we begin today's program, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which UC Davis sits. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Catchwaldehe Band of Wintoon Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzaldehe Wintoon Nation, and Yochadehe Wintoon Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. On behalf of myself and the entire staff of the M.F.A Museum, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. I am Rachel Teagle. I'm the founding director of the Jan Schrem and Maria Minetti Schrem Museum of Art, and I am delighted to see all of you here today. A few weeks ago, on the first weekend of the school year, we had the perfect afternoon for a public opening with activities with some incredible horses out front. And today, what a perfect weather for an artist lecture. I'm so glad to see us all inside in this nice, snug, dark room. And my goodness, what a pleasure we have in front of us to hear from Deborah Butterfield. I'm going to keep my introduction short because I know you're here to see Debbie. I will just say it has been an incredible honor for this museum to not only host the work that's on view in the galleries, and in the few weeks we've been open, so many people have shared with me how moving it is, especially to see the mud horses, works that people have told me they've only seen in books, to see here in the flesh. And that reclining mud horse, I think she's a Buddha. I've decided she's not a horse at all. I think she's a Buddha. Yeah. But the pleasure is not just in hosting the work. The pleasure is having the artist herself, a dear Aggie, come home to her alma mater, and more importantly, bringing so many friends with her. I feel like our museum family has grown because of all the love that Debbie Butterfield has brought with her to this exhibition. So please join me in giving our artist a warm welcome.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to just start out reading a few things because I like to get into the slides and just gallop. But there's just some stuff that needs to be said right now. One of my major influences was a poet named Vicky Hearn, who was a dog and horse trainer and a philosopher. And one of her quotes was, "There is cruelty and ruthlessness, and above all, there are failures of imagination, unhappiness caused by someone's being unable to imagine what it would be like to be someone else." One of the biggest problems we have in our world is a lack of empathy towards one another, animals, and nature. The arts invite us to inhabit other people's minds and spirits. We can lose ourselves and try out another point of view. See colors and shape in new ways, hear sounds we would never imagine, learn new ways to interpret emotions with our bodies, to identify with a character in a novel who is so different from oneself. The arts challenges us to make ourselves uncomfortable, to stretch our minds into unfamiliar positions. We can train our minds like our bodies to become more flexible and to inform our relationship with the world, our work, and other beings. Art teaches us to find solutions to problems in a nonlinear way. We are rewarded for doing the mental silly walk. For along our path, we discover so many things we would not have noticed if we were marching in a straight line. Many major discoveries in math, science, and medicine were made from having a vision of a new form of geometry, or building a cardboard sculpture model of a DNA molecule, or finding an analogy in nature that provides a clue or solution to a problem or strategy. This is creative thinking, even art. We all need it, even if we never pick up a brush. The arts nurture our spirits and help us to give meaning to our lives. Vicky also said, there are people who describe training as a process of discussing with animals the attributes of God, a discussion in which the human listens as much as she talks. I find the progressive and systematic development of a trained horse very analogous to my work in the studio. Struggle, frustration, questions, repetition, and hopefully each day finding some harmony and satisfaction. And now we begin, hopefully. This is Willie, one of my horses. This was in the day of 4x5 cameras, and we didn't know he was sticking his tongue out till we got the film developed. He was so thrilled to be photographed. I came to Davis in 1970, around Christmas of '69. I wanted to work with Bob Arneson and be a potter. And so I get to school, I have to sign up for ceramic sculpture, and he says, oh no, we don't do pots in the university. We only make sculpture. If you want to make a pot, you have to do it on your own time. And of course, he ended up critiquing my pots more than my sculpture. He loved a good pot. These were some horse hoof vessels made with a pit firing method, kind of referring to the pre-Columbian ceramics, but also to the presence of a horse, implying that the horse is there. I was a ceramics major. I even went to a production pottery school and thought that's what I was going to do with my life. And I ended up being pretty bored with it. I moved to a farm out in Dixon that Bill Tanaka owned. He was running the horse barn then, and he raised thoroughbred racehorses. And so here I was, I'd been teased for drawing horses when I was little, so I tried to swear off horses, but here I ended up with baby thoroughbreds all around me. And I was invited to ride some of the horses, and so I decided to start making saddles because I didn't have the guts to make horses yet, but the saddle implied both the presence of the horse and rider. And it was quite a trick because I had to build a clay-fired horseback, and I added fiberglass strands to the clay and would drape the main saddle part over it, and so with grout so it could slide. And then, of course, the leggings and stirrups were fired separately. The thing I just discovered today, I had always had this theory that Western saddles reminded me so much of Chinese porcelain, the incised flower patterns. And so one of the artists in the print show mentioned she was part of the Chinese diaspora to Central America. So I looked it up, and sure enough, Chinese ceramics arrived during the Ming Dynasty, 16-something, into Mexico. There was a huge, Magellan opened this trading route through the southeast. And so the influence of Chinese ceramics on Mexican ceramics is profound. So I just learned something today in that other room. I was so excited. And, you're carving leather-hard clay, and it's just exactly like carving leather. That's why they call it leather-hard, I guess. So this was a saddle that was in the tack room, and I just thought it was so interesting how there was this functional object that was asleep or at rest. And later, I think it led to the reclining horses. But it also, everybody was teasing me because of the phallic nature of the Western saddle and, this where you're sitting. And I just was so annoyed with it. But so I used the saddle as drapery, like in Greek sculpture, where the form is revealed by the drapery. And so that was my little joke with myself. I had always wanted to be a Chinese potter and was afraid to make a fake Ming Dynasty pot. But once I had the saddle format, I'm like, wow, I can have the pleasure of doing this with my own form. And so this was a Ming Dynasty saddle, and I actually made the base of it in the form of Ming architecture, and it cured me of wanting to make anything that needed to be on a base because I'm terrified of table saws And so I evolved into things that had 4 legs on their own. This is a piece we weren't able to borrow, but this is a Northern Sung dynasty in the 12th century. It's a pot that was slip glazed black, and then the white part has been carved away, the carved peony design. And I made this saddle. And when I put the glaze on it for the clear glaze firing, it cracked, and I was just heartbroken. But then I realized that the Chinese used to fill the cracks on a valuable pot with gold because it implied that by this kind of suffering and, age, we gain wisdom and value. And then this was the last saddle. And it actually got burned in a show in Chico and died, but it was an homage to my mare who tried to dump me in a cactus patch. And it's a racing saddle, a tiny little saddle, and so the spines are really fragile porcelain. Like anything that prickly, it's also really fragile. And they're put in so they can be removed with silicone so they kind of move a little. And when I got a job after grad school teaching at University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I got Lucas Samaras to come as a visiting artist, and I showed him these slides and everything, and he got really weird. Well, he's a very weird person anyway. He's scary. But then I said, Lucas, these ended up being an homage to you. And he said, oh, my name means saddle maker in Greek. So it was pretty cool. And then I got a scholarship to Skowhegan School in Maine, and I knew they didn't have any kilns, and I had gotten very exhausted from satisfying the kiln gods. So I went there thinking about how Wiley taught us to make art. I was kind of an English minor and loved puns, came from San Diego where I grew up to Davis, and everybody in San Diego would hate it when I make puns. So I end up in this drawing class with William Wiley, and he shows his slides, and there are these little tiny paintings, and then the title is all these puns underneath, and I didn't even think that was legal. So so it was really cool, and so we couldn't think of what to make, and he said, think of a title and then illustrate it. So this was a bed of leaves, and so it was actually quite complicated to bind all the wood and then make this quilt out of leaves. But it was I left it in the forest, and, we're born on beds, we jump on them, we play, we hide under them, we make love in them, we're sick in them, we die in them. And I just wanted it to be this evocative piece that the viewer kind of made their own story or meaning out of it. They would not critique it because it was not made out of art supplies. So then I had tricked my way as a freshman, into a welded steel sculpture class at San Diego State. And so I had learned how to weld. So at Skowhegan, I welded this metal frame and made, with chicken wire and burlap dipped in plaster, made this cow standing on the bed. This little Taurus in, this strange world, trying to keep her balance, almost like in the back of a pickup truck. And what happened for me in Skowhegan was that I realized I could work outside, and they also expected you to work 5.5 days a week. So I think it really got my practice more disciplined, and the fact that I could work outside meant that I could actually have my cake and eat it too. It's what I really needed. And then John Buck is my husband, 49 years now. We went to England in 1972. I guess that would make it almost 50. And it was sad for me and rainy. And so I made this reindeer that was a fountain. And it was very influenced by Magritte, as if it were just a piece of the sky. But you can see there's a garden hose going up its left hind leg. And a pun, a reindeer, Ugh. And then I'd been in a bad car wreck after seeing this movie as a freshman, a Finnish anima myth about a Finnish herder with his reindeers who follows this magical white reindeer into the tundra in the midnight sun. Hopelessly lost, she turns into a beautiful woman and seduces him, and after they make love, she turns into a vampire and kills him. And then I get into this car, I'm on a date, and a psychiatrist who'd had 7 martinis was going 100 miles an hour and hit us head on. And I was, around the ceiling for quite a while and very annoyed when people called me back. It was really was upsetting. But I kept having this reindeer calling me and wanting me to follow it. And I really wanted to. But I finally just told him, no, get out of here. And so it took me, and I had amnesia too. So it took me about 5 years to get to this point. And I figured out. And so I had made this piece about the reindeer crossing the river and the one shaking off over here. And then I realized it was the river Styx, and it was about dying. So I'm like, enough of that. But it was during Vietnam, we were protesting, knocking on doors, and I thought I wanted to make horses, but all I could think of really that I'd seen in public art were war horses. And now they're tearing all of these down, but I just think they should saw the humans off of them. Because these horses were being good boys, they were doing the best they could with what knowledge and understanding they had. Anyway, most of them were stallions, at least the ones depicted. So I decided by doing mares, or like the Chinese didn't do so much war horses. They did women playing polo with a very gentle, lovely horse, and the typical Tang Dynasty horse. So that was my inspiration. And this was a portrait of my real mare, and I had leased her to a woman in Woodland when I went to England with John, and she bred her, but her husband was a contractor and allowed me to weld in this little stall next to where my horse was. So I'd only done oxyacetylene welding, and this was a little arc welder. And so I didn't want to have to measure my horse because I thought a tape measure is too many things. So I measured my arms were the same as the butt to her shoulder, and her head was this big, and her hoof was this long, and her forearm was this long. And I realized, it was me. It was like a Vitruvian mirror. And so that was how I measured horses. Well, I do measure them by hands anyway, but also other body parts. And they were plaster on a steel armature, but painted as if they were a Turner sky, some kind of atmospheric apparition. Oh, and then my graduate show got to go to the Berkeley Art Museum, thanks to Diana Fuller. And then I got a job teaching in Madison, and this was a show I made for the Madison Art Center that went to Zola Lieberman Gallery in '76. And we had visited Secretariat, the most valuable horse in the world at that time. I gave a talk in Lexington, and he was covered in mud. It was so fabulous. He was so valuable and just like completely wallowed. And I just thought about the New Guinea mudmen and the idea of releasing the form, from the stone. And so I made all of these horses that were now paper mache over chicken wire and steel that were light enough that I could move them myself, and just covered them with mud and straw and small sticks, anything that I gathered in my backyard. And I installed them where a print show had been installed and didn't change the lighting. I decided I just wanted them, thank you, I'm a flapper. I wanted them to be more of an installation rather than singular objects. And was a very small room, and you had to actually go by their teeth or their hind legs to get through there, and many people would not go in there. There was really a dynamic tension. And I got my first review in the Art Forum, and the first sentence was, "Deborah Butterfield's horses have no genitals." They didn't have eyes or nostrils or hooves. Anyway, I didn't send that one home to my parents. And then Roberta Lieberman in Chicago came up on an amazing day in 76 to look for artists for a new gallery in Chicago. And I happened to have just shown my slides to my students, so I showed them to her. And she said, "Let's have this work come down there." And we went home for lunch, and John walked in with a bag of morels. And we had asparagus growing in the garden. And I just never forget this wonderful, lucky day of asparagus on toast and morels on toast. Anyway, this was in my first show there. William Lieberman, her son, is here now. It's been 47 years that I work with them. Anyway, this piece I made when I got to Montana. We lived in a lodgepole pine, on the edge of a lodgepole pine forest. And I just love the idea. Is this a horse, or is it something that's, I'm imagining, the shape in the woods? But I also thought of Duchamp's nude descending the staircase, the idea that all the legs indicated that maybe it was moving. And then these were at Zola Lieberman, and for me, they really represented, well, I went from Madison to Montana State, where John was teaching, and I went from being the head of sculpture to being a housewife on a ranch out in the middle of nowhere. And it was really kind of hard on me for a while. And then as the snow melted, there were these big plots of things, on the side of the rivers. And I just thought, oh my God, they remind me of reclining horses. So horses can sleep standing up. And these were mares. They were self-portraits. I wanted to do personal work, but Manuel Neri did female form so well, I didn't want to emulate him. So I used the horse as my own being. And so I thought, wow, reclining nudes and the idea of lying down, naked in an art gallery with a wolf predator critic stalking you was really... It was scary, but it was also a way of saying, you know what, I can make myself vulnerable to you. I'm strong. I had to drive these out from Montana wrapped up in a flatbed trailer, and when I got gas in North Dakota, the guy asked me if I was going to the dump. And then Roberta Lieberman took my slides. I hardly sold anything in my show. I think I sold a couple of little horses. I was really sad. But there was this work in the warehouse, and she went to O.K. Harris Gallery, and Ivan Karp was one of the few dealers that would actually look at people's art. And he said, "These are marvelous. Let's put a couple of these in a group show next fall." I was thrilled. And so then in April, he called me and he said, we had a cancellation. How would you like to have a one-person show in New York next month? I thought I could manage. And so you just never know. Sometimes the worst thing that happens ends up being the best thing. So that was an incredible time for me. And then in 79, I made this piece for the Albright Knox, and they said, you can either go there, we can't ship you and the work. So I said, well, the installation's pretty important. So I made these mud pieces about, I said, just put them north, south, east, and west, 3 feet apart. And so they were able to install them without me. There's a longer story there. And then this is one of the pieces. It was at Hanson Fuller in 78. And De Rosa owns it now, and they were so kind to loan it for this show. This was me. The other pieces looked like I bulldozed them in. They were actually hollow, and very well made. And then these pieces, I actually took responsibility as a human for putting the sticks onto the work, like making a wiki up or a teepee or a lean-to. But it also looked like a bonfire, like this horse was basking in the rays of the sun. So this piece is called Bonfire. And it was on the 5th floor of the gallery. They had to crane the work in, and then I had all these lodgepole pines. And the gallerists were like, I'm sawing away their sawdust everywhere, and they were just kind of like, oh my God. It turned out okay, though. This was also a reference to this work. Very influenced by Magritte. All of us were at that time. And this was Diana Fuller at the opening last month. So she gave me that show at Hanson Fuller, and Wanda Hanson was here last night. So this show's been so wonderful to pull back all of these people and memories. So many of them are dead now. I mean, I'm so sad. Roy DeForest and Bob Arneson and Bill Wiley and Wayne Thiebaud and Manuel Neri. They became lifelong friends as well as teachers. And I'm just so sad they weren't here. And this is a piece I gave to Wiley in '78, and he had it up on a shelf, and I think it kept him company. In fact, he accused me when I was a grad student. He said, I think you're only making these horses so you won't be lonely in your studio. And I said, yeah. So he wasn't lonely in his studio. And then he made this wonderful piece in there. And then Gloria and Roy DeForest really became our closest friends. And we visited them at a beach house they had on the Oregon coast. I made this piece. It's on a little steel armature, but it was all driftwood and seaweed. And a lot of it was broken. You can see that the nose is missing. And she's donating it to the museum, but we realized she hadn't signed the paper yet, and the museum didn't want me to remake the horse. But they pointed out that technically it hadn't been donated yet, and if Gloria said it was okay, I could repair the piece. And I still had the same seaweed from 43 years ago. And so now it has a nose. And then after I made the mud and stick horses, we moved, and I made 29 trips to the dump, and then I would go buy rebar for an armature. And it occurred to me, what are you doing? You could be using all these old fence posts and junk to make an armature. So I did that, and I felt like I was the mud lady, and that I had to put mud on it. And really, it was like a really good cake that didn't need frosting in the end, and that it was time to let that one go. And this was my favorite piece from the show. I had the people we bought this little farm from, rather than tearing down a fence and building a new one, they just built a new one inside the old fence. So there were like 3 rows of ragged fence. And so if you roll up hog wire, to get it out of there, it tends to want to explode and can take your eye out or gouge you. So the prudent thing to do is to stick a stick in it so it won't explode. Well, so this whole horse is kind of held together with these sticks jamming through it. And at some point, the sticks will rot and the fire will just explode. And they say a horse can revert to the wild in 3 weeks. So this is kind of my analogy for that. And a lot of my friends were getting pregnant, and I just became more concerned about, rather than having these beautiful, full, hollow mud forms that were more like pots, well, they're still vessels. They're always vessels. And yes, they are Buddhas, and horses of prayer, basically. I just became fascinated with what was inside, and could I kind of demonstrate this internal energy, or like an X-ray of a heart or a soul at any given moment. And then in '80, I got a Guggenheim and made a show for the Israel Museum outside in the sculpture garden. And I thought it would be really meaningful to show this work right now. I used all this material from bombed out sites and, the junkyards. I made 5 pieces in a month. This was Jacob's ladder, which they kept. This is me and Avi working. And every day, the construction workers would come and pray all day on the pavilion next to me. And that's the piece I made it's this mesh within this totally delicate rusted steel that's just like so fragile, and then mesh on top of it and then sewn together to hold it there. And this was in 1980, and I thought the earth was so delicate then. And this was my war horse. That's at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. And this was the installation. And then that same year when I got back, I built a show that traveled to a bunch of museums. And this piece was at the, Diana Fuller actually arranged it. It went to the Walker Arts Center, and this is the piece that they bought. It's called Rosary. It's the crushed heating duct system of the Rosary Elementary School in Bozeman. And the pink dust was on there, so I sprayed it with fixative, and then I kind of pierced it like St. Anthony with the ret 2x4s and things. It was a very Catholic horse. And then I was also invited in '86 to work in Hawaii. Thurston Twigsmith, who owned a Honolulu Advertiser newspaper, had started a gallery in the newspaper building. And he said, I can either ship your work over or I can ship you and John over and you can come and build the work there. So we got to live in this amazing house in Kona on the Big Island and be visiting artists. It's kind of an art community. And our son Wilder learned to walk there. And so I made these pieces with the help of a woman who was from the Volcano Arts Center. And these are 2, Maluhia and Uha Ula Ula, red thigh. This was my mare. She was pregnant, and I'd always check on her when she was going to foal at 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And this is at 10 minutes after 12. And she's like looking at her watch like, okay, where were you? It's time. And then John had said to Twig, I will give you my life's work for some land here. And Twig said, well, I have to ask my daughter if she wants to buy this land, but if not, I would love to trade you art for it. And so we go out to Kilauea with Gloria and Roy and our little kids. I don't think you can see it in this. There's a full moon and the volcano is fountaining at 1,600 feet, Kilauea. And Gloria had bought some Pele's tears and things. They play with Pele's hair in these little bubble postcard things. And we had just gone to the volcano house, and they had all these letters, because you're not supposed to remove lava from the Big Island. And they had all these letters from people who had had terrible things happen, and they were returning this lava to the island. And Gloria still bought this postcard, and I'm begging her not to take it on the plane with her. And so she walks out behind me and she sees the volcano, the full moon, the white horse. And she ran back to the car and she's crouching behind the car. And I thought she was throwing up. I'm like, Gloria, are you okay? There she is. She was ripping the plastic bubbles and putting the Pele's tears back onto the ground. It was one of those experiences. And so I said to John when we got in the car, I said, Twig's going to call. He's going to trade us for the land. And sure enough, 8:30 the next morning. So we got land and built a house studio there. And I've been working since '86 in Hawaii in the winter. And that's when I got home. I had the show I changed from OK Harris to Ed Fort Gallery. And by working in Hawaii, where they had all these colored metal roofs and, of course, a bad climate and storms, I'd go to the junkyard or the dump and I'd get all this crushed colored metal. Well, it gave me the courage to try to make colored welded steel horses instead of just rust-colored ones. So I've developed quite an amazing palette over the years of colored metal. But this is Joseph, after the many-colored coat, but also Chief Joseph of the Appaloosas. And this was my studio in 1990, and I was trying to just make pieces with as few things as I had, take anything off that wasn't necessary. And just the fluency with the cutting torch and welding, it was just such a joy to add and subtract, to be able to erase. And I don't know, one of my favorite times of working. This spells riot. And this is Palma, after my husband's mother's name. Her mouth is open like Guernica, and it reminded me of Picasso, but I didn't want to name it that. But I thought of his daughter, Paloma, and so John's mother was Palma, so I contracted it into Palma. But that's in our dining room. And this is Ikazuki, who was a famous samurai legend horse. And this is made out of metal I dug up from a dump in Gallatin Gateway near us, and it's old 1930s cars. And the metal was so beautiful. It was a virgin American steel instead of recycled metal. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I am a good welder. I can't. Cut like butter. The stuff you cut now is all sparkly and crazy. This was a horse that grew up without his mother, and he ended up looking in the water a lot because he was lonely and seeing his reflection. So apparently the enemy was attacking across this river, and the other horses were afraid to go in the river, but Ikazuki was not, and he led them to victory. So he became kind of a legend horse. And I thought he looked like samurai armor. And this is a piece in the show, Shin, just about, eternal power, that I made for Bob Arneson when he was dying. He was a very close friend, and his family, Sandy and Tanaya, came up to visit us in Montana in the summer, and then he went on to Walla Walla Foundry to finish his last pieces, and came up. I had the green horse in the back room, was at the Alumni Center, and came up for that, and that was the last time I saw him. And then Sandy called and said, I think this is the end. So I made this piece over the weekend and sent it to him, because every Friday he would give us a lecture on Chinese, or not just Chinese, all ceramics, all through history. But I just remember him explaining that the Chinese horses were tomb ornaments, and that they were like a pack horse, but to carry your soul into the next world. And I just wanted Bob to have this horse to carry him. And so I hadn't used mud in many years, so I put mud on it because of Bob, because of the clay. And anyway, I didn't even have a picture of this piece. I sent it out when it was still wet. And so I'm so grateful to have it in the show. I think it's one of my best small pieces. Glad to have a picture. And then this I made on September 12th, 2001. I just didn't know. It's called White Crane. I didn't know what to do after 9/11. I'm O negative, so I went to the Red Cross, but nobody needed blood. And they had so many people in there. And I said, well, does it matter if I'm O negative? And she said, sweetheart, all of these people are O negative. We're not messing with anything else. But so I came home and went into the studio and made this piece. And then there's John, who is named after my husband, John, but also as a tip of the hat to John Chamberlain. Now, this is my first bronze that was commissioned for the Walker Art Center Sculpture Garden. And Mark Anderson from Walla Walla Foundry drove out. Wilder was a week old, and I just couldn't travel. So he came out, and I showed him my slide talk, my studio, everything. And he said, drive a truckload of sticks to Walla Walla. We'll cast it in bronze, and you'll come back, and we'll weld it together and make a horse. And this changed my life. It was so much fun. And the thing is that you can bend bronze sticks and you can cut them and shorten them and weld them back together. And then they tool it like it never happened. So even after a piece is cast, I can go back and change it. And this was a piece that Thurston and Sharon Twig-Smith bought that I knew he would buy it because it has a naked lady in the middle of it. Well, this was my studio in Hawaii. I just worked under a shed, and we sent bronze sticks over, and Mark would come and we welded an armature, and here I'm bending banana polka or passion fruit vines around it. And then we had to ship them back to the foundry to be cast. I can't afford to do it now. It was like $4,000 then to get it to Walla Walla from Kona, and now it's about $14,000. So now I mainly make small pieces, but this is the finished piece in bronze. It's at the Kansas City Zoo. And then this was for the Denver Art Museum. He wanted 3 pieces, and he wanted one piece that the kids could play on. And I had a dressage horse from Berlin who loved to lie down and have you cuddle with him. And the cat would lay with them. So I thought he is the one that should be not too sharp or dangerous. And then this was Argo, about the cowherd with all the eyes. This is Birch. And second daughter, my black mare. Okay, we're going to go faster now. This is Walla Walla. There was this, unlike the witch in the gingerbread house, there was this ivy vine on the tree in Walla Walla, and I'd go by and just, I wanted it, and and this was a bougainvillea vine on the back of Arneson's back porch, and I would always pinch it and wish it dead, and finally it died, and Sandy drove it up to the foundry, and so it's the right hind leg of this horse, one of my foundation legs. And then Mark said, just cut the damn ivy down. It was winter, it didn't have leaves on. So we cut it down, and it kind of just jumped onto this piece. I don't think we couldn't tie the wood onto the armature quick enough. It was sort of like magnetic. And this is a piece that was a commission of a person who had manzanita on their property, and this was for her daughter Zelda. And such a thrill for me to work with material I'd never worked with before, and the color and the shape was really fun. This is my palette. This is the green department and Bozeman, and this is my studio. This was Walt, my welding assistant. And this is the finished piece. And this is a piece made out of ripped up concrete and rebar. Kind of reminded me of molecule models and things. And this was after Mondrian, the Georgi. This was called Turning Its Head, from the Buddhist poems about taming the ox. And this is in the show. This is one I kept, Hawaii. I had to take life drawing from Wayne Thiebaud, and it was pretty terrifying for a young hippie in 1970 to go into this class with this person wearing a blue suit and a carnation, while he would fall asleep in class. And so it was so formal. We were all terrified. But, he said the door is locked at 8:10, and if you're late, you may join us at 10 o'clock. But he made us put a grid on our paper, and first he had us draw the naked lady up in the corner, and then we had to make a grid and, use our pencils to find the location where the model was. Then finally, in the last hour, he let us connect the dots. Now, what we had looked like this. It looked like a mountain range, or this is the big island of Hawaii. I always think of the horses as the female, the earth. But anyway, I never learned to draw from him, but I did learn how to look at things, just how gravity and weight and volume is displaced. And I was very proud to get a B from him. I'll tell you. Anyway, this is wood that the foundry guys, Mark Anderson and his wife Patty, helped me collect in 2002. And then I built these pieces in 2003. This is Mauna Kana, the Hawaiian for Montana, and it's in the Smithsonian. And, oops, I didn't show Isabel. This is another piece. I had finished the piece, and there was just something wrong with it. The legs were too long, and I walked over to it and leaned something on it, and then it reminded me of these old pieces that nobody had seen in 35 years. And I just felt like all of a sudden it represented the environment of the forest and my studio. And so we waited and cast these other pieces, and they're some of my favorite big bronzes. And this was from a fire. Sometimes death is so extraordinarily beautiful, too. It's another big forest boy. And so now it was a quick show of me and my horses and some of the work I've made thinking of them. Oops, no, I'm sorry. This was Victoria and Isabel. I showed them both Grand Prix. And this is Isabel and my arena in the lesson. And this is Isabel. She's outside with Hawaii. I'm making this piece and I'm like, damn, who is this? And then I'm like, oh, it's Isabel. And this was Hoover. He was like an Appy draft horse. And he looks like a painting in the Joan Brown painting in there. By getting this horse, I didn't have to do fake Tang Dynasty horses. I could do portraits of Hoover. And that painting Joan did, the pink feet, everything, the pink nose. Anyway, we had the therapeutic riding program in my barn for 5 years. Look at him go. This picture makes me so happy. We would play red light, green light with them, and the horses would get so excited about it, and the volunteers were just out of it, and they're like, green light, come on, green light. But it helped with proprioception with the kids, and it was fun. And that's Hoover. Marty Margulies has this piece. And this was Rex. He won the Therapeutic Horse of the Year for the whole Northwest and second for the United States. He pulled a cart, and we were on CBS Sunday morning. You could drive a wheelchair into it, and I would sit in a little jockey seat as an emergency technician, but quads, and could drive it. We'd wrap the reins around their hand, and I had a set of reins for emergencies, and we would book down our dirt road, and it was really something. Well, Rex. And this is Rex. And this was Ismani, my first warm blood. Fabulous horse, an Anglo-Arab. And this was Ismani. And this was Willie. And there's Willie. And this was Captain, I'm sorry. He was a half thoroughbred, half quarter horse from the Wine Cup Ranch in Nevada. And I thought he'd be a fun trail horse, but he was such a working horse. I had to trail a rope off of him, otherwise I couldn't handle him. He had to think, oh, I got to reserve my energy because we got to go get the cows. But he was a wonderful guy, and he ended up liking to do dressage, so. And that's Captain. Oops, that's a terrible picture. My mare Danuta. And that's Danuta. And Spotty, he's 21 now. I went through the Grand Prix with him, and then he went lame when he was 19. But we're coming back. He's getting sounder again. He is a half warm blood, half Appaloosa. And this is Spotty. These are little burls on the wood of light, I guess, that they make these polka dots. And this is my mare Danny, who Chrissy showed her Grand Prix this summer. I train her too, but I'm gone so much. I have someone else ride her as well. And this was her. This was just another piece out of Madrone that the color was so much fun. This is our Crystal Bridgers. This is Hunter at Zola Lieberman Gallery with Indelible, which weighed 2 tons and was 9 feet tall, and is now the Des Moines Art Center or the hospital. Indelible. Yeah, and John Papajohn bought it. And this gallery, it's now half the size, but I'd had so many shows in this gallery, and these pillars, swear word, pillar, always dominated. You put 2 horses, well, 3, 4, I could never make it right. Those pillars dominated every show I had, and we put this one horse in there, and they turned into saplings. Like, you can see how big they are. This was midday at the Children's Hospital in Iowa City. And this is, I'm showing you all the different places I work. This is Walla Walla Foundry. They built me a studio next to a kind of repurposed greenhouse. It's really low. Nobody wanted it, but it's a perfect place to store sticks. It's kind of like Kmart, you know. There's different, you know, you have your madrone, you have your cedar, you have your pine, you have your driftwood. And before they built the studio, they built a slab for me to work on. And I felt like Uncle Scrooge in his money vault, you know, with all these sticks, just so happy. And this shows the investment process. So the rebar is holding these shapes in place, and they coat the sticks in ceramic shell, and then they burn them out. And there's Mark Anderson, my dear friend, with the furnace. And this shows the pour. So with my work, they take the ceramic shell, burn it out, vacuum it, swish it out, and then they invest it in a second mold, a more traditional plaster mold, to make sure, since they're one of a kind, it makes sure that the ceramic shell doesn't break. And so it's like then they have to melt any wax out of the spruing. So it's like a twice-baked potato. But what they found is the more they spend before it's in metal, the less time there is afterward chasing it and welding. So this shows just the metal after it's been cast. You can see, you know, the welding patina there, and it hasn't been, they have air tools that they use to disguise the welds and make the surface, you know, contiguous. It's hard to see. This is one of those giant ones, I think midday, being welded on this table. And well, this was me and my assistant working on it. You can see she had a stand on, and she's 5'11". And this is it on the table. Isn't that something? So they're using a TIG welder. This is silicon bronze, and they use a silicon bronze rod of the same alloy to weld it, so that when it's welded, it's all one piece. And when you patina it, you're not going to get 2 different colors, and that the bronze will be fully integrated and structurally sound. Okay, here's an instance. I'll come back 6 to 8 months sometimes before the piece is cast. And I came back and I'm like, what am I going to do? This horse for my show in New York, the neck is too long. I'm going to kill myself. Well, I said, we got to cut the head off. So here's the head. Weighed about 250, 300 pounds. It's on my hoist. And there you can see the 2 are approaching one another. And then we welded them back together. We had to bend the sticks a bit. And then this is me doing the patina on the horse. We usually do a base coat of white and then start building up with ferric nitrate, which has got the iron in it that makes the rust color. The more the concentration, it's more yellow. Higher concentration and heat, it turns more red. And then using some black and white paint to create shadows and highlights. But it's very hard work, and you're standing on a concrete floor with a respirator and a torch, and you have to get up to about 300, 400 degrees. So it's a very time-consuming process, and it's chemical. It's not paint, so it's not as direct as just painting it. So here's the journey of this horse into my first show at the Nazy Gallery in New York, in Chelsea. I love how the guy's got his hand on his face. And this is the Ascension. This is Hawaii, where we live. This is a view from my house. This is Hualalai volcano that's been quiet for 200 years. And these were feral horses and donkeys that were on our land when we moved there. And these are koa trees. I just wanted you to see how different. We live up at 3,500 feet. It's the cloud forest. I think it looks more like Africa probably than you think of Hawaii. And these are ancient tree ferns having a congress. This is a ohia tree that moves around at night, I think. They're like horses. Look at them. And that's my studio. There's my assistant. It's John helping me. Oops. Sorry. John helping me get wood. This is a koa tree, a very special native tree. This is a tree that's fallen down. Isn't it just the mud and stick horses? And this shows a couple of small bronze pieces inspired by that environment. And this is a piece, a big piece. John and Mark Anderson went down this cliff and got me all this wood at the place where Kamehameha was born. And Thurston Pricksmith gave me this ancient canoe hull. It was riddled with termites, but it was really old. And then it has the bamboo and pieces of this boat that was wrecked. And my son, Wilder, the nanny, had taken him down to the beach. He was 11. And there had been a big storm, and we'd seen a fishing boat had crashed. The sea wife, too. And he called me collect from the beach and said, "Mom, we can't swim." And I said, "Well, you can go to a different beach." "No, you don't understand. You can make a horse out of this boat." And he said, "Well, they won't let us on the pier anymore, honey. I can't drag it through the hotel. It's all arranged. I've spoken to the police. You can park on the pier and take as much as you want." So some of this piece is from that. And this is a sunset from our house. We were drawn to the place by the dead trees. And we've been there for 20 years, and we have loved the trees so much, and now they're all healthy. That's right. And then this is Iceland, because of John and Nina Zurier taking my son Hunter on a class in Oakland to Iceland. We came in 2013, and they were kind enough to introduce us to all of these people in Iceland, and notably Gunnar Dungel and Thordis. Sigurdardata. Thank you. I'm running out of words. Anyway, they let us come for a month and stay in one of their farms and use the studio. And so I've gone 5 times now, and I make work there. And this is Snæfellsnes on a different spot. You can see the little peak, which I think Hunter climbed. Yes, and got in big trouble. It's a magical volcano glacier. And this is it from another point. And this is the beach where I gathered many, many pieces of plastic and debris. And to my dismay this year, the damn Icelanders have cleaned up the beaches. They are impeccable now. And Nina has galloped many a mile on this beach. And this is me up north, as happy as a person can be on a tiny little Icelandic brave horse. And this is a eider duck up on the north point of Iceland. The farmers make safe places for them to keep them away from the foxes. And the birds come in, they're wild, they nest, they go in, they pull their down out, and the farmers come in and pull the down out of the nest and put hay in there. And the birds don't seem to mind. They seem to realize it's an equal trade. But eider down is the most, I think, expensive substance on Earth. Anyway, this is where the eider ducks were, and this was our friend Emma picking up stuff. This was a Icelandic sheepdog on the eider duck farm, and of this debris, old eider goose duck boxes, I made this piece in Thordis's studio and then cast it in bronze, and we all had a show at Paula Anglum of John and Nina, Hunter and Emma and John and I, and Thordis. This was Thordis's studio, and her cat Ananas, who was one of my best friends there, a good studio assistant. And this is the view shoppy from their house. This was my suitcase. And this is one of the pieces I made at home. I kept it in sticks. I just thought it was so perfect. And this was another one. I loved how using the plastic, it was my way of, it's kind of in between the steel pieces and the bronze pieces. And it was so much more fun to paint than brown and gray. And then this is in Wyoming, me gathering sticks. And this is where I almost had a heart attack seeing all this wood. And this is an example of one of the pieces from there. This Nancy Muller, one of the sponsors of this show, this is her home in the Bay Area with this piece installed. And then I read about the bay keepers of Alaska cleaning up all this debris that had washed up from the tsunami in Japan to the Alaskan shores. And they went out on these boats, picked all this stuff up, and shipped up to Seattle, where they were supposed to be able to lay it out on the pier and have local volunteers recycle it, sort it. Something went wrong with their permit, and King County would not allow this, and they said they had to take it to the dump. Well, Waste Management was where they took it, and somehow I got a hold of this man who thought it would be wonderful if I made this piece about the tsunami, Three Sorrows, and he snuck me in, and I dumpster dived in this huge dumpster. It was 100 degrees, and it was all moldy salt water, and got all of these things. And I don't know if you can see it. There's a little tree growing out of this buoy. I tried to keep it alive, but I couldn't, but it was so fantastic. So I made this load. Oh, there he is. I made this load, and then a second load where, because King County offices, they could see Waste Management. And so they had this huge pile of these big white bags. And he said, I can get you this. We can take it off the outside with a forklift. But he said, backhoe, but you can't look in any of the bags, and we can't open them here. And we have to be fast. So I'm kind of, like the blind man and the elephant feeling these bags. And I got another truckload of these bags and then was able to make the piece that's in there. So this was, it's on a bronze armature. So I had like a cast rock, I had cast, bronze, fake, iron. And so I just used a lot of material that I already had cast and then tied the plastic onto it. And to me, the horse is it's like the earth standing amidst this tragedy, earthquake, tsunami, meltdown, the three sorrows. And I don't know, to me, she's the earth, she's the ocean, and is in dismay over this. And then this is a piece from a forest, an area where there were fires. It's not totally burned, but a little bit. And showing some of the detail the foundry can get. And this was very painful to patina. It just, it's bronze, it would poke you and cut you. And this is about 2 miles from our house. This was a fire that we had to evacuate for. And this shows, it's so incredibly beautiful though. The bark just blistered and peeled off, and underneath the tree looks like it's been varnished. But already these baby trees were coming up. And Carly took this picture. She gathered wood, she's my assistant, of a bird nest on this incredible burned thing with all the green coming up. So in human time, it's pretty horrible, but I think it does kind of need to happen. And this is my studio, how I build them. The head and neck often come at the very last, so I'm really working on a large rectangular canvas where I can add and subtract material. And you can imagine how dirty it was. So we painted the bronze armature black so I could look at it. And these pieces were cast in bronze. It was presented with this field of debris around it. And this is bow tie. This little thing that looks like a bow tie somehow hung on to that big chunk. And this was a fire in Bozeman that burned 28 houses in my friend's horse barn. This was her in the background. This was my show at Marlboro in New York in November. And this was a young filly that arrived to do a freestyle. And my friends Harold and Kelly from Bozeman and Steinan from Iceland were there. There were more Icelanders there too. And this was a horse for the Kennedy Center. It's at the New Reach Kennedy Center, and this is a ginkgo grove in honor of John Kennedy. It's kind of a meditation grove. I was so honored to do that. And that's me and John quite a while ago, in front of our chicken coop. And this is the percherons that they had here. I have one more thing, my final thing by Wittgenstein. I sit astride life like a bad rider on a horse. I only owe it to the horse's good nature that I am not thrown off at this very moment. Thank you.
Deborah Butterfield, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think at this point we have time for just a few questions, but my colleague Ben is going to be heading out with a microphone. We're going to ask you to speak into the microphone so we can capture your question so that everyone can hear it. But if we do have some questions, please raise your hand high. Looks like we have a question right back there.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talk. I have a question about Bowtie, whose picture I think is on the inside cover. Is he completely a bronze?
Yes.
That's incredible.
It weighs about 1,800 pounds.
Yeah. 1,800. Thank you.
Other questions?
Just yell. We don't need the mic. Yeah.
And have you had
maybe you do need the
problems with pests in the mud and the wood?
Start over. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. The mud and stick pieces seem particularly fraught from a conservation point of view. And if you had problems through the years with pests or in the wood or the mud or...
The DeRosa piece I restored about 20 years ago, and it was filled with rat shit and olive pits. And in those days, hantavirus was our biggest viral threat. Those were the days. I use a vacuum cleaner, with a mask and compressed air. But interesting you should say it. The piece from SF MoMA has been in storage at ADHOW for 35 years. And I would go in there, it's covered with dust. And they wanted to lend it, but they said it would cost so much to conserve it that it was in really terrible shape. And so they had it down by the airport in their staging area. And I went to look at it. I says, what do you mean? It's in perfect condition. It looks exactly as when I made it. Well, the mud has shrunk away from the sticks and this and that. And I said, that's what mud does. You know, that's the whole point of this piece. You know, I mean, not the point, but that's part of the beauty. And it was just dusty. And they wouldn't let me get compressed air. They wanted me to take a brush, but when I took a brush, the little pieces of grass broke off. So I ended up just blowing it off. And all of a sudden, this gray, dusty thing became this beautiful brown thing. And then I dusted off the sticks and placed them around, and all of a sudden, it just came to life. And then they lent it. And, I did a mud demonstration there. It's mud, paper, glue, dextrin, a sugar-based glue that's like on the back of a postage stamp that you can rehydrate, and hog hair and grass hay. And I mix it all together, and it goes on the chicken wire, and it goes through like ferrule cement. So I had made a sample, a little, rebar and sticks and wire. I made a sample that was dry, and then I had one mix the mud up on videos, and I brought the original dirt. And they have all the materials now, and they know the recipe. I'm so thrilled. It's like a huge weight off of me that someone else can restore these things. But so then I made the mud mixture and put it on and showed them how I did it. And then I took it off and had everybody practice it. It was really funny. But now we brought it here, and we weren't allowed to move it ourselves. All of a sudden, it was very precious. And we had to have their person come and oversee us moving it. And I'm like, dude, you had it on a shelf in storage for 35 years, and now we're not allowed to touch it. Anyway, that being said, I'm very grateful that they lent it, and it was a great experience.
Gentleman over here, and then here.
Yeah.
I really couldn't tell if it was an artifact or my imagination, but has anyone ever suggested that those two brown pots that you showed from your period when you thought you were going to be a potter looked exactly to me as if they were the foreleg and hoofs of a horse, and that it was a foreshadowing?
Oh, totally. Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. The pre-Columbian pots were often in the shape of animals, so I used the horse hoof to imply the presence of the rest of the horse. Yeah?
Whenever I travel around, and I should have kept pictures of where I've been and where I've seen them, because as soon as I see one of your pieces, I say, that's a Butterfield, and she's from Davis. she was one of our students. So it's been fantastic. But what I was wondering as I watched your work and wondering about how you create it, do you, as you find the pieces, do you envision what it's going to be, or how does it come about? Do you have an idea and you find those pieces, and then are you working on multiple pieces at one time?
I can make multiple armatures at one time, and I've tried to work on more than one at once, but I have a kind of a singular mind. But obviously I know if a stick is going to be a leg stick or a neck stick because of the requirements of that. But I try to not prejudge, and I mainly just try to get material that I find exciting. And the way I work is I start making piles. I go collect things and put them on the floor. And I don't know, something is like an animal instinct. I just start building things and adding and taking them off. And my work, I love metals. I love how copper is so flexible, but at a certain point it breaks. And lead is so fluid, but it has no structural integrity. And steel will pretty much do anything you want, but it's pretty hard to bend. And then the cast bronze will bend really well, but then all of a sudden it breaks because it gets crystallized when you bend it. But I love the quality of metal. I love the different weight, the different density. I just love the material. I love earth materials. And then there are different types of wood. What is it, not only what species is it, but what has it been through? Has it been in wind or fire? Has it been bulldozed? What climate does it live? In Montana, the trees have to be very careful because the weather is so harsh. And in Hawaii, trees can make some really silly decisions. And it's really fun. And my husband, too, you go there and the geometry of nature is different. And so it's like getting your mind flushed out. Or going to Iceland. I didn't really love to travel. I only love to go places where I can work and be with horses and cook and just, live my life like if I lived there. And it's like different kinds of horses, like a saddlebred is more like copper and a draft horse would be more like iron. And in riding real horses, even if you only have one breed of horse, like right now I have an Andalusian, an Appaloosa, and an Oldenburg, and each one has such fabulous gifts, but totally different abilities and mindset. And it's, as a rider, it's just so challenging because you have to learn new every time, each new horse, but then each time out, it's always like, I don't know, it keeps you in the moment. It's moving Zen, I think you would call it. Anyway, thank you. That was a nice question. Okay, one more.
So the technique, when the finished horse, it looks like it's made out of driftwood or the toyon or the bird, it's all the same technique. It's just how it's finished that makes it look so different.
Well, whether I'm using more white paint or more black paint or more iron, the painting part is the hard part for me. It is torture, and it often takes me more time to do the color on a piece than the build. I'm really good at making stuff. I can't help but make things, but painting them, I'm so often disappointed with the final result. And the other problem, it's like firing a pot. A pot is so beautiful when it's still wet, and then it just keeps shrinking. And then when you glaze it, it's almost like it's entombed. And it's sort of the same with the bronze. It does shrink a tad, and you make the color just perfect, and then you put the wax on, and it takes it down about 30%. It takes the contrast down. And so I have to exaggerate my patinas before I put the wax on, and that's hard for me to do. You just don't know what you're going to end up with. And so mud and sticks are so much more immediate. But this way, I have so many, I used to make pieces out of mud and lily leaves and all of these things. And I had this traveling show in the 80s, and every place I went, oh, we have one of your pieces. We're having a cocktail party for you. And I go there, and the wire is stretched. The cat knocked it off the piano. The wood has shrunk, and I go there, and the piece looks like roadkill. And I'm, so I spend the whole time in the kitchen floor with pliers trying to remake something that I barely remember. So it's never going to be what it was, but it can be because some of it's missing and stuff. And so that's really why I did the bronze. And it's trompe l'oeil, but that isn't really what my interest is. I just want to have the image fresh and strong, and to not have the viewer concerned with how it's made. H.C. Westerman was one of my favorite artists, and we saw his show at the Whitney, I think it was in 73 or 79, I don't know. But one of the things that was so great is the craftsmanship was so great, but not that great. When you looked at the pieces, you responded to the idea of the piece. And then maybe it came, like, how did he do that? How did he tie that piece of wood in a knot? But do you know what I mean? That he didn't let the craft supersede the intention of the work and kind of steal the show. I think that's really important. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Manetti Shrem today. Please enjoy Deborah Butterfield's wonderful exhibition and take some of those words you've heard today into the galleries with you. Thank you for coming.